Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak. Now, yesterday, the government seemed to draw some line when it came to the state of the nation, announcing tough new measures to curb political tension. Some of the measures include organizers must notify police 3 days prior to rallies. Police in the rank of inspector or above are allowed to stop meetings. Hate mongers who are fueling political tension have been warned. For example, persons promoting messages of hate or ethnicity on their platforms will be held accountable. Social media platforms and media outlets will also be held responsible for content they publish. I want to get the thoughts of some of my guests on this, but we'll also be talking about the role of religion in the affairs of this country, bearing in mind the sort of chaos we saw in Muranga on Sunday was, prior to a church service that the Deputy President was attending. And we know we also have a prayer day, a prayer period, actually, starting tomorrow till Sunday. And we'll be talking a bit about that with Archbishop Martin Kivuva of the Mombasa Catholic Diocese. But also to talk matters law is Joy Mdivo, Executive Director, East Africa Center for Law and Justice. We also have Steve Ogola, an advocate of the High Court, and Chris Wamalwa, Member of Parliament, Kiminini. To each of you, thank you for finding time, and the Archbishop will join us a bit later on. Now, of course, you saw what the National Security Advisory Council did. They sent a warning shot to hate mongers, accusing those who have fueled political tensions in the country that they will be held responsible for their actions. Steve Ogola, let me start with you. Is this a step in the right direction?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction, in the sense that the law already prohibits hate speech. Speech that is insightful, that can trigger tension and violence, so that in its proper context within the law is proper. But also, Wahiga, this country has had a history of manipulative application of the law, meaning using the law to limit the ability of your opponents to freely express themselves. So we must be careful not to derogate from constitutionally ordained fundamental rights of freedom of assembly and association. Okay. So you cannot ban rallies. So rallies must happen, but personal responsibility must be required. But also, if you want to punish hate speech, you punish hate speech after the offense has happened, but you cannot use approval of using the Public Order Act as a precondition for approving rallies, or providing security at rallies. If the idea is to provide security, then the Public Order Act fits in very well. But if you want to punish hate speech, then you don't need to require notification of police officers. So we have to balance the legitimate aims of the law while protecting the fundamental rights of everyone.
Okay, let me get some thoughts from Joy Mdivo as well, who's the Executive Director, East Africa Center for Law and Justice. And let's look at some of the specifics, for example, Joy. And Kenyans online yesterday were a bit concerned when it was brought out that people found promoting messages of hate or ethnicity on their platforms will be held accountable for their actions. Also, media outlets will be held responsible for all content they publish. Social media users will not be spared either if found guilty of disseminating false information or ethnical content. And I especially want to talk about the whole issue of disseminating false information, because when, for example, media houses publish investigative pieces, usually those mentioned as suspects in those pieces will say that that is false information. Is there a challenge that this Public Order Act or what was announced yesterday might be used to, in a sense, censor free speech? What are your thoughts on this?
The determination of what is true or not true would be where the crux of the matter lies. Because whenever the law has ingredients that are prescribed as constituting an offense, you have to look at each aspect of it individually. So if I look at particular sections that were being mooted yesterday, you'd realize that, okay, we are specifically targeting media disseminators, people who broadcast information, that they need to verify the information before they broadcast it. They need to be sure that the information is not ethnically instigated or insulting to anyone, and a plethora of other definitions. And in that, I was a little bit concerned, because when it comes to mainstream media like yourselves, you have the time to verify and to fact check and to do whatnot before you broadcast it. But we have seen in recent past the very able and effective use of social media to broadcast some of the things that would not previously be broadcast. So for example, let me take Oscar Sudi. When he wants to do a press conference or to go live, He doesn't bother inviting the media houses. He just stands wherever he is. His guys get on Facebook Live and he speaks. Now, in such a situation, then what I got from yesterday is that if you broadcast live an event on your social media platforms, then you will be held culpable in case anything goes out on that broadcast that is hateful, that is untrue, and so you can see that there was actually not just a reiteration of the law, because those of us who are listening to the speech would be like, you know what, but that's already the law. That's already what is required. There's nothing new you're telling us. But when it got to the space of social media, they're like, oh, so that is where we were headed with this. You will remember that in recent past, there has been a rise of social media networks and social media broadcasts that have made previously untelevisable events televisable to millions at the same time. So that is where I think that the leaning was going towards. But over and above that, it's also important to remember what Steve said, that if we were being given the restating of the law afresh, it tells you, therefore, that there are instructions that must have gone out through the Ministry of Interior to the agencies required to enforce the law. And if that is the case, therefore, then there is the danger of the law applying in anticipation. We have seen in the past where something is stopped and you're told, it is because we have information you're coming to say things here that are not true. Now, that is the realm of, clairvoyancy. That's not law. It's you being a crystal ball reader. But in Kenya, stranger things have happened. But I'm glad that we are having the conversation about operating within the confines of the law. And with how we are headed now in Kenya, it was important because the temperatures were rising to a place where we needed to be reminded that there is law in place. Do not forget it. Okay.
Let me, and of course, the political class has, or some within the political class have begun to react to this already. And this is where I want to bring in Honorable Chris Wamalo, MP Kiminini. I'm seeing a tweet here from an account of Honorable Mwangi Kiunjuri. I want to trust it's his legitimate account, saying, are we backpedaling on the freedom of assembly by invoking the Public Order Act? Kenya's second liberation was largely a struggle against misuse of this act. As an MP, Honorable Wamalwa, do you have any concerns about the Public Order Act, and of course, some of the guidelines that were given yesterday about how public gatherings, especially of a political nature, will be looked at moving forward?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I want to condemn the violence that was in Murang'a, in Kenol, and of course, want to call upon the political class. Of course, every time we have an assembly or meeting the colleagues, we must actually be held responsible. And we don't want the security agencies maybe to take advantage of this and infringe on other people's Bill of Rights. Pertaining the Public Order Act, this is an act, but we have a constitution. There's no way an act can supersede the Constitution of Kenya, which is the supreme law. If you read Article 39 of the Constitution, it stipulates that anybody in this country has the freedom of movement. We also have the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. All that is outlined in the Constitution. So whatever is in the Public Order Act, it is just helping in terms of operationalization. First and foremost, I want to support the Security Council, whatever they said. I'm a politician, and as we move towards 2022, the temperatures in this country are rising. We don't want to balkanize this country. When you look at what happened in Rwanda, it's just started like this. So to me, whatever the Security Council had advised, I'm calling upon my colleagues, the politicians, to abide by. And when you say that you want to have a meeting and you notify the police, this has been there. You are notifying the police 3 days in advance for purposes of preparation. So to me, I don't see anything new. Whatever was said yesterday, it is something that has been there. It is something that we politicians have actually been saying. So, but when politicians are going somewhere, let's say for a church function or meet the people tour, it is a responsibility of the police to be there to provide order. In case of maybe a competitor has put goons or whatever, police must be there to take charge. But in a situation whereby, let's say there are 2 or 3 rallies in a given area and the police don't have the manpower, of course, the police can say, let's stop one rally or let another rally move about 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers from each other to avoid anarchy. So whatever was said yesterday, I do agree with it. I don't see any problem. It is the law. It has been there. But we don't want the security agencies to take advantage of this and infringe on other people's rights when it comes to freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and freedom of speech. But having said on something on social media, it is true in social media, people must be held accountable. Waigwa yesterday, this issue of about opening schools. Yesterday, there was something circulating all over online that Okiya Omtata has gone to court, and the court has given some injunctions that the school should not open. You know, he believed it. Only later to be told it was a hoax. So the people who are using social media must also be accountable, that whatever information they are giving it out there, it must be with precision, accuracy, and it should not be messages of hate or inciting other people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a good opening statement. Let me come back to you, Steve. A couple of things that obviously will be a challenge. I can see politicians saying we have no problem informing or notifying the police of our gatherings, but we don't intend to be, quote unquote, seeking for permission. And there might be a bit of a sticking point there. Bearing in mind, one, we are still under some COVID-19 public health protocols. Remember, for weddings or funerals, assembly should be not more than, I think we are now at 200 people, as per the last announcement made by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Also, we've seen another situation where a politician will attend a church service, which is, a small number, but once outside the church, as they are leaving, they claim a crowd came to them and demanded that they address them. It's going to be tricky to enforce this Public Order Act, Section 5, bearing in mind some of those scenarios. Let's talk a bit about that in your view, and what would have been the best way forward.
I think, Wega, what we must appreciate, the law is not implemented in a vacuum or in the absence of common sense. Mm-hmm. If you look at the intention of the proper framing and application of Section 5 of the Public Order Act, it is a facilitative provision. It is not a prohibitive provision. Facilitative in the sense that if you're going to hold huge gatherings, then they need to provide for security. But if you're holding smaller meetings, then you don't need to notify the OCS. If you're meeting small groups of 20, 50, 100, 200, or if you can arrange your own security, or if the meeting is going to be peaceful in your own view, then you don't need to notify the OCS. The purpose of notification in advance is to allow or to facilitate security arrangement so that the meeting is not disrupted, and thieves and thugs who sometimes take opportunity of this kind of meetings to steal and to wreak havoc are also stopped in their tracks. But this Public Order Act should not be applied in a manner that then makes it difficult for people to meet and to associate. Because if it does that, politicians will innovate out of it. And there are many ways of innovating out of it. Remember, during the NASA political formation at that time, they decided to go within the county assemblies. So mainstream their conversation within each and every county assembly. So there are many ways of innovating out of a crisis and making sure that you still reach the people. The challenge with the political class is this, and this we must also call out. The political class also do not necessarily believe in the bindingness of the law. As we talk about the intention, as we question the intention and the sincerity of government, we must also call out the political elite. Because the only time they consider the law as binding is when the law operates in their favor. And we have seen selective application of the law in this country. You might see in the coming days some meetings being sanctioned, some meetings being declined, and then chaos will erupt. I think the way forward is this. Let us apply good judgment and discretion when you're convening meetings as leaders. If you know you're going to have a huge meeting, then by operation of the law, notify the authorities so that security arrangement may be made. The authorities, once notified, must provide that security arrangement. They have no right to censor or to ban a political meeting, ostensibly because they fear that platform will be used for hate speech. I've already said in the law, the definition of hate speech is insightful utterances. You cannot preempt insightful utterances beforehand. You have to be there You have to listen. You have to perceive that these utterances are insightful. Then you have to invoke the law, arrest and prosecute. But to ban a rally in advance, or to maybe curtail the freedom of the media in terms of blacklisting, if you try to encourage the media or you try to ask the media to blacklist or not to cover the event of certain political leaders, ostensibly because these leaders usually incite the public, I think then now you are crossing the red line and you're now beginning to unfairly and unconstitutionally limit media freedoms.
Okay.
So there's a balance there. And you know there's a balance when you know the confluence between the law and common sense.
Okay. You've spoken of a balance, and I want to get the thoughts of Joy Mdivo on that. Joy, Chris Wamalwa speaking about a text he saw yesterday which he thought was true, that the High Court had called off the return to school on Monday, and he's concerned about fake news. But the whole debate about fake news worries many online because for them they feel the online space is their only outlet. Where is this balance when you hear that persons promoting or disseminating false information will not be spared either if found guilty of that? And remember, we've seen in other countries where even social media tweets can get you in very big trouble. Let's talk about the balance that Kenyans will be looking for during these times when political temperatures are rising.
Lying per se is bad manners, but is not necessarily a crime. What happens is if the lie has a cause and effect that leads to a crime. So for example, if I ask my children if they've eaten sugar and they say no, Papa, and I can see the sugar around there, that is an issue I will deal with because I can tell that there is a root of ukoraness coming out. But in the public sphere, somebody can disseminate something that is not true. But if it was, how do I put it? If it was an innocent fraud, not like yesterday, that one for Omutata. Omutata does this regularly. So people were reasonably expecting, oh, this is true. So that's why they believed it, myself included. I was like, oh, okay, Omutata meteza kama yeye. But when you're getting into the realm of now what is considered insightful or hateful, it's what the utterances trigger that make the offense. So for example, it's not just the words coming out, are those words coming out intended to cause people to act in a certain way or to revolt in a certain way? That becomes the concern. And yesterday when I was listening to Honorable Kinyua, when I was talking at the steps of Harambee House, okay, first and foremost, I noticed that gender there was just not working, but that's a conversation for another day. But I also heard from him the fact that there has to be nuance to what you're talking about. So for example, if you are going to an area where you know certain words are triggers, certain when you go to a certain zone, it triggers an event, then if you on purpose use those words, then it becomes a crime. So for example, what happened in Rwanda when they're using words like cockroaches, and I think we saw in Kenya in previous elections words like madoadoa. They sound like innocent words, but when they come out to a certain audience, they're intended to mean something else. And I think that's the red line that was being drawn. That anytime you are in a social media space, or if you are the one organizing an event, and you know that people in this region have a certain trigger, and you go ahead and trigger it, then you will be considered to have committed a crime. In this particular instance, it is important to remind politicians about that, because when you go around and you know how to work a crowd, because that's something that politicians do. They know how to work a crowd. Now they have to be very, very intentional about the words that they use. But the dissemination on social media also has to be balanced in equal measure, because it is possible for one message that I send from my phone right now to reach potentially 10,000 people within the next 1 hour. And so if I have a carefully crafted message that is driving a hate message, the reach is far greater than even via TV or via radio. And therefore, there is need for those who are disseminating social media messages to also be mindful of this. Now, what I wonder is if Kenyan technology and our investigators have caught up with technology such that they can find the true origin of some of this information. Because, for example, if I send it to my youth group at church and people disseminate it, and the ones who are disseminating are the innocent bystanders, for lack of a better word, and you can't get to me who originated the message, but the innocent bystanders get caught up. Will we really clamp down on this vice, or what we'll have is a situation where I just keep changing devices and the law never catches up to me? So there are some challenges also in terms of the law being caught up with technological challenges so that we actually get the root of the matter. Because we have seen people who generate hate messages, but you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know who's bringing it out. So to penalize everybody in social media who spreads a message would be counterproductive, because there has to be where it all starts, which is something that I hope the government is working towards.
Okay. It might be a futile action in many ways. I know I need to take a break, but let me allow Honorable Amalwa one word on this. Honorable Amalwa, Steve Ogola there, Joy Mdivo calling out the political elite for, among other things, their bad manners. But a couple of things we've seen. One, the political elite has quickly forgotten about COVID-19 protocols. We know that right now the limit for public gathering should be 200 people. We've seen them assembling in larger groups. And when we ask them on previous shows why they do that, they say that when you're a politician and you're headed to a different location and the public stop you, you have no choice but to greet them. You have no choice but to address them. Some say that even if, and let me read you a tweet actually as you respond to that. Where is that tweet? Someone is saying these laws are a waste of time. Have these things not been said before? The problem with our system of governance is lack of goodwill in implementation led by these politicians. Even when culprits get arrested, the charges never go beyond being mentioned in court. Can you respond to that, Honorable Amalwa?
When it comes to the matters of the law, it has nothing to do with the politicians. Remember, these politicians are accusing, they are the lawmakers. They are the ones who make these laws. So when an issue has gone bad, I don't think the problem should always be with the politicians. Politicians are people who have been elected by the people. And for instance, if I go to my own village, I've gone for a funeral or wherever I am, all members of that society will want to come and say hi to the elected leader. What do? At times we use our also securities to try and control. But there's no any given area whereby a politician has gone looking for the crowds and they want to go against the corona rules. But in any case, like the other day we saw the president in, was it in Rwaka? I think he was passing by. Then there was a crowd. What he did was to come through the sunroof and say hi. I think coming through your sunroof is also one way of not going against the protocols. We've seen the deputy president, we've seen the Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga doing this, but they are doing it on their sunroof. So when it comes to breaking the laws, lawmakers don't break laws because they are the lawmakers. They're not there to break the laws.
That argument doesn't make sense, Honorable Amalwa.
But another issue,
lawmakers
one thing is this.
I don't know if it's right for you to say that lawmakers can't break the law because they are the lawmakers. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. I never say that. You know, the assumption that is there that when it comes to breaking the law, it is the lawmakers, the politicians who are more likely to.
If you are breaking the law, you are not breaking the law as a politician. Let the law take its course. But don't look at the person that because he's a politician, it's when he's breaking that law. No, lawmakers are law-abiding citizens. So we don't break the laws.
Okay, I want us to think about that as we go to the break, and I'll come back and interrogate that a bit more with you. But as I mentioned, we're going to have a wider debate when we come back. We're also going to talk about the role of faith, religious groups, the church. This week has been a week of soul searching for the church. We've had lots of discussions on this media house and across different platforms about the voice of the church, whether the voice of the church in 2020 is the same voice, is as potent as it was back in the 1980s, 1990s as well. And joining us to talk a bit about this when we come back will be Archbishop Martin Kivuva of the Mombasa Catholic Diocese, and we'll be chatting with him shortly on this and getting reflections, even as we know that 3 days of prayer begins tomorrow, and we'll be talking about that. You're watching Daybreak. Stay with us. Please give us and send us your feedback and the questions you may have for our panelists here, and I'll be posing that to them, or your questions. 22422 is the SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. We'll be right back.